In our previous episode, we saw Jacob have many children. Some from his first wife, some from his second wife, some from the maids of the first wife and the maids of the second wife. Great big, huge family. After all this occurred, he was just getting too big. Like his family was getting too big and they needed to move out from under Laban. So it's time for him to get out of there. And before he had to leave, they wanted to discuss his wages. So he discusses his wages with Laban, and they come up with, or sorry, I should say Jacob comes up with this method of he's going to take out the spotted animals and the black sheep or whatever for his wage. And before he can go through the forest to do that, Laban goes through and takes out some of the animals. So he is going to be shortchanging Jacob a little bit. And Jacob uses this method to create superior animals with like selective breeding and jumping over a stick. And hopefully we'll find out more about what is going on there because it's kind of interesting. So we'll see what happens. Genesis 31:1. Jacob heard Laban's sons complaining. Jacob has taken away all that was our father's. He has acquired all this wealth and honor from what belonged to our father. Here we go. We have some jealous children of Laban. They see the wealth of Jacob and they're jealous of it. They're envious of it. They see all that Jacob has and they see that it has been taken away from their father. Not really putting in context that Jacob was working for their dad for quite a long period of time and he made Laban quite wealthy. They just get jealous of the position that Jacob is in now. Genesis 31:2. And Jacob noticed that Laban looked at him less favorably than before. So it's not just the sons of Laban, it is Laban himself. Laban is looking at Jacob negatively, less favorably than before. He's not as big of a fan of Jacob as before. When Jacob was there working day and night, slaving away, making Laban very wealthy, he was good with that. But now that Jacob is going to break off and do his own thing, Laban is not very happy. Genesis 31:3. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your people, and I will be with you. And here we go. God hasn't forgotten about Jacob. In fact, he's probably been with Jacob this entire time, leading him around, as we'll see later on. But it's time to go. It's time to get out of here. It's time to go back to the old land. Genesis 31:4. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field of his flock. Genesis 31:5. And he said to them, I see how your father looks at me, that he is not friendly towards me as before, but the God of my father has been with me. So here we have the State of the Union address. Jacob is letting his wives know what the situation is, how it's going on, and how their father, how his heart is kind of turned against Jacob. Genesis 31:6. You know that I have served your father with all my might and power. 31:7. But your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God did not allow him to hurt me. So those shenanigans that we've seen happen, where he's talking about changing the wages 10 times, was that a literal 10 times? Probably, maybe even more than that. We saw the first one with kind of the deal with Leah, him not getting the woman that he was supposed to, then having to go another 7 years for Rachel. And then we got this stuff where Laban's taking out the sheep before he can go through to find the speckled and the spotted and the black sheep. And there's probably been a bunch of these other situations as well where the wages have changed. It seems like the wages, Laban, he acts like, well, ask, tell me what you want for your wage. He says that in the appearance of being in all openness and ready to just give freely. But he's actually really stingy. It's like he's almost, asking him to go first, and then he's going to kind of whittle him down, so to speak. So that's just, he's a little bit of a tricky fellow there, that Laban. Genesis 31:8. If he said, the speckled shall be your wage, then all the flock bore speckles. And if he said, The streaked shall be your hire than all the flock bore streaked. Genesis 31 and 9. Thus God has taken away the flocks of your father and given them to me. So it's just kind of explaining that nickel and diming that Laban's doing with the manipulation of which were to be his and which were to be Jacob's. And God is going to intervene as Jacob has declared, for Jacob is with God and God is going to look after him through all this. He doesn't need to get all, worked up and grab his pitchfork, for he's got much more strength behind him in the strength of the Lord, the one that can move mountains and create worlds, a much more powerful being than himself. A really good ally, but a terrible foe. Genesis 31 and 10. And I have a dream at the time the flock conceived. I looked up and saw with that the rams which mated with the she-goats were streaked, speckled, and spotted. 31:11. And the angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob, and I said, here I am. So this is a vision that Jacob has had. Genesis 31 and 12. And he said, look up and see, all the rams which have mated with the flock are streaked, speckled, and molted. For I have seen all that Laban does to you. 31:13. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar, and where you vowed a vow to me. Now arise, get out from this land, and return to your native land. Here we go. Here we got the commandment, the guidance, the intervention. It's time to get out of here, Jacob. It's time to go. It's time to get. You've done your thing. Laban, he's ripping you off. You need to go back home to the land of Isaac and Abraham. Genesis 31:14. And Rachel and Leah answered him, is there any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? 31:15. Are we not counted by him as strangers? For he sold us and has also quite devoured our money, the price you paid for us. 31:16. For all the riches which God has taken from our father are ours and our children's. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do it. So he's explained the whole story to Rachel and Leah, and they're talking about the inheritance, and they're talking about how they were essentially sold to Jacob as almost like a form of merchandise, that maybe that cuts off their inheritance. It's like, well, what's left for them? It's like, are they exiled from their own home, that they're treated the same as this stranger, the way that Jacob is being treated now? Jacob is being treated like a stranger in the land, even though he is a relative of Laban. He's not treated the same as a son or maybe a more intimate member of the family. Instead, he's treated the same as like some sort of stranger, and the wives, which were his daughters, are treated the same as well. So that's kind of a weird circumstance we got going on here. And then in the end, whatever God says, do it. So they're in line with Jacob as well as God, that they're trusting in God to look after them. Genesis 31:17. Then Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives upon the camels. So here we go. They're packing up. They're ready to leave. He's got his wives on the camels. He's got his sons on the camels. There's probably quite a variance in age between all these sons. They weren't all necessarily born immediately one after another, and even if they were, that's still a huge range because there's a lot of them. Genesis 31:18. And he drove away all his livestock and all his gain which he had gotten, the livestock he had obtained and accumulated in Paddan Aram, to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. So they're all packed up and ready to go. Genesis 31:19. Now Laban had gone to shear his sheep, possibly to the feast of sheep shearing, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. When it refers to the stealing of the gods, what it is talking about is idols. So where they got some knickknacks or some sort of monument, maybe a carving, a casting. Maybe it's a casting of an animal or something, some sort of idolatry nonetheless. And Rachel took it with her. She took the god, the idol, out of her father's house. Genesis 31:20. And Jacob outwitted Laban, the Syrian, Aramean, in that he did not tell him that he intended to flee and slipped away secretly. Genesis 31:21. So he fled with all that he had, and arose and crossed the river Euphrates, and set his face towards the hill country of Gilead. So here we go. Jacob, he gets all of his stuff packed up and he just leaves. He doesn't tell anyone he's going, he just leaves. He was under the cover of darkness or early in the morning or whatever. He just left unexpectedly so that they wouldn't be able to, I don't know, give him a hard time and steal from him and make it hard to leave, right? So sometimes you just need to get out of there. God tells you you got to get out of there. You don't just soldier around for a while, go do a bunch of other things. You need to go when you're told to go. And Jacob got the message and he just went and left. Who's to say what Laban would have done had he stayed? Maybe he would have, oh, well, I got this other daughter. Or, maybe those sheep aren't your sheep. Look at those spots and, all manner of things, and then nothing gets done. You know how some of those family things go where there's a little bit of a conflict. You go to resolve the conflict and nothing happens and you're worse off than when you started. I've seen that happen too many times. That's just how it is sometimes dealing with people. You just never get anywhere. Genesis 31:22. But on the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. So they got away, and it took 3 days for Laban to find out. That's a pretty good lead, I would say. Genesis 31:23. So he took his kinsmen with him and pursued after Jacob for 7 days, and they overtook him in the hill country of Gilead. So even with that 3-day head start, they knew generally the direction he was going to go because they knew what land he was from, and probably he talked about coming from there, so they kind of knew which direction he was going. So they caught up to him. They didn't have all the children and all this stuff that they're hauling. These would have just been the mighty men. Just send out the soldiers, so to say. Travel light. They don't only take what they need and just pursue with all force. Genesis 31:24. But God came to Laban, the Syrian, in a dream by night, and said to him, Be careful that you do not speak from good to bad to Jacob, peaceably then violently. Looks like God's given Laban a little bit of a warning. Really heed it. Genesis 31:25. Then Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent on the hill. And Laban, coming with his kinsmen, pitched his tents on the same hill in Gilead. So here we go. I guess he pitched it for the night or whatever. I guess he did that a couple hours before sundown, kind of make camp or whatever. And then we got Laban on the same hill, camping as well. That's kind of funny. So he was able to just kind of walk over to him because they're on the same hill. Genesis 31:26. And Laban said to Jacob, What do you mean stealing away and leaving like this without my knowing it, and carrying off my daughters as if captives of the sword? Laban has known for years that Jacob had to go back to his homeland, and every time he tried to leave, he came up with some scheme or some sort of mechanism that kind of hold him back to prevent him from leaving. So Jacob, not trying to negotiate, just goes off and leaves, and this upsets Laban. He's wondering, what's going on here? Why you just leave? And you're taking my daughters. Like you're a thief. You just came in and took them like bandits, which is kind of ridiculous. I mean, they've been married together for years, so I don't know. And Laban continues on. Genesis 31:27. Why did you flee secretly and cheat me, and did not tell me, that I may have sent you away with joy and gladness, and with singing, and with tambourine and lyre? 31:28. And why did you not permit me to kiss my sons, grandsons, and my daughters goodbye? Now you have done foolishly in behaving like this. 31:29. It is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful that you do not speak from good to bad to Jacob, peaceably then violently. It's funny because that's almost exactly what it sounds like he's doing. He's being all nice and friendly. How come you just left and you didn't even let me kiss my grandkids goodbye? And I could have killed you. I could, it's within my right to strike you down. Like it's just crazy. It's what a mood shift. What a change. Is that really the voice of someone that is loving of their family to to even entertain the idea of striking down, to bring the sword, to bring the blade? Even if he's just bringing it up in passing, that is not really the right way to do it. That is not, that's not demonstrating his love for his daughters and his love for Jacob. So it's I don't know. Laban, going into this, you give him kind of the benefit of the doubt, but as we've gone forward, as we've moved on in this chapter, he's just, he's more revealing his true nature. What was once hidden is now revealed, and we're really getting to understand who this man is. Genesis 31:30. And now you felt you must go because you were homesick for your father's house? But why did you steal my household's gods? Genesis 31:31. Jacob answered Laban, because I was afraid, for I thought, suppose you would take your daughters from me by force. Genesis 31:32. The one with whom you find those gods of yours, let him not live. Here before our kinsmen, search my possessions and take whatever you find belongs to you. For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the images. Laban is very upset about taking of his gods. It seems like that is really the crux of this situation, that is probably the thing that offended him the most, was that they took his gods, which were probably very, very important to him, if not maybe the most important thing that he had. And Jacob had no idea of this situation, and he says, search our belongings, find them, and whoever has them, put him to death for taking them. For he has no business with idolaters and idolatry and these graven images, these idols, whatever they are. Genesis 31:33. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and the tent of the two maids, but he did not find them. Then he went from Leah's tent into Rachel's tent. I don't know if there's some sort of reason why there's this special order that he goes through and searches, but it is true that the last place you look is always the place where you find it. Once you find it, you stop looking. But he probably was singling out Jacob as if this was something Jacob did, so he checked there first. And then he's like, well, what about that first daughter? Checks there. And then I was like, well, might as well check the maids. Maybe one of the maids took it. But the last person he would expect to have it would be Rachel. It was probably in the same way that Jacob favored Rachel. Rachel was probably favored by Laban as well. That's why he did not give Rachel as a wife to Jacob in the first place. He wanted to use Leah first and then move on to Rachel. So she was probably very precious to him, his precious little daughter, his little princess, whatever, right? So the last place is her tent. Genesis 31:34. Now Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. Laban searched and felt all along the tent, but he did not find them. Genesis 31:35. And Rachel said to her father, do not be displeased, my lord, that I cannot rise up from you. For the period of woman is upon me, and I am unwell. And he searched, but did not find the gods. So they search around, they search everywhere, they cannot find them. Rachel's sitting on the saddle where they're hidden, but she tells a lie to her father. Or maybe it wasn't a lie, but she was unwell and just hid them in a spot that he was unable to check, so he was unable to find them. Genesis 31:36. Then Jacob became angry and reproached and argued with Laban. And Jacob said to Laban, "What is my fault? What is my sin that you so hotly pursued me?" Genesis 31:37. Although you have searched and felt through all my household possessions, what have you found of all your household goods? Put it here before my brethren and yours, that they may judge and decide between us. So this is almost like a form of a trial where they're going to get the bystanders, the people that are here, that are going to be able to judge over all these things. Genesis 31:38. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your she-goats have not lost their young, and the rams of your flock have not been eaten by me. 31:39. I did not bring you the carcass of the animal torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss of it. You required of me to make good all that was stolen, whether it occurred by day or by night. 31:40. This was my lot. By day the heat consumed me, and by night the cold. I could not sleep. 31:41. I have been 20 years in your house. I have served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flocks, and you have changed my wages 10 times. 31:42. And if God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the dread lest he should fall, and fear lest he offended of Isaac, had not been with me, surely you would have sent me away now empty-handed. God had seen my afflictions and humiliation and the wearing labor of my hands, and rebuked you last night. There's no question that Jacob has worked for a very long time for Laban. And he says in here in this couple lines about the quality of his work, that he was a very good worker. He looked after everything. He didn't let animals go astray, and anything that kind of happened, it came out of his pocket. It didn't come out of Laban's pocket. That everything that happened, Jacob would make right. There's probably no better worker you could have than what Laban got with Jacob. Jacob was just fantastic. And now he's trying to deny him his wages, even though he did all of this with clearly defined reasons, right? It was 7 years of labor, and he would get the daughter, and then another 7 years for the next one. And then I'm sure there was something kind of penned down about this flock thing for the remainder of those years that he was there. So it's, he did good work, and he didn't complain. He wasn't, just a terrible worker. He did what was asked and went out above and beyond. So how is it that Laban can come after him? And then that transposes into this little section where he talks about the God of Abraham, being aware of all of his afflictions and whatnot, and the suffering that Jacob has gone through in all these years of labor. And that vision that he sent Laban from the night before was a bit of a rebuke, some way to kind of let Laban know who's in control, who has the power. And it was almost a little bit of a threat too, just careful where you're going with this, Laban. Don't come down too hard on Jacob, or we'll see what happens there. Genesis 31:43. Laban answered Jacob, "These daughters are my daughters, these children are my children, these flocks are my flock. and all that you have is mine. But what can I do today to these my daughters, or to their children whom they have borne? Well, Laban, there we go. So he's still claiming that he owns his daughters and owns the children that they've had. He's kind of becoming a little bit of a monster. Or should I say his true colors are revealed. What happened? Oh, well, we'll discuss your wages. Ask and we'll make it so. You don't own anything, I own everything. Like, what happened here? What happened to this man? Was he just a big liar? Was he a dirtbag? I don't know what the deal is with Laban. He just seems to generally suck. Genesis 31:44. So come now, let us make a covenant or league between you and I, and let it be for a witness between you and me. 31:45. So Jacob set up a stone for a pillar or a monument. 31:46. And Jacob said to his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate together there upon the heap. So through all these events, here we go. This is our little bit of a peace treaty, so to say, that we're going to kind of work it out, I guess. Let the party begin. Laban called it Jigar Shadutha, witness heap in Aramaic. But Jacob called it Galeed, witness heap in Hebrew. 31:48. Laban said, this heap is a witness today between you and me. Therefore it was named Galed. So here we go. We got our little peace monument that they're going to kind of, they're over their little strifes, they're over their conflict, and they both have their own name for it, for they have kind of different lineages. So there we go. We got our nice little pillar. Genesis 31:49. And the pillar or monument was called Mizpah, watchpost. For he, Laban, said, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent and hidden from one another. That sounds nice and lovely, but it kind of isn't, right? Because it's like, it's almost expecting them to backstab each other, which I don't know. I don't know if Jacob's the backstabber, but I do feel as if Laban is. And usually people judge other people based on how they perceive themselves in others, right? So there's some sort of element to that, right? A liar would expect someone else to lie. That same kind of idea. Genesis 31:50. If you should afflict, humiliate, or lower, divorce my daughters, or if you should take other wives besides my daughters, although no man is with us to witness, see, remember, God is witness between you and me. Well, it looks like Laban still wants to protect his daughters, and maybe he just isn't ready to see them go. If we recall back when Rebecca left or whatever, he didn't want her to leave either. Oh, just stay here another week, just stay, and we'll do this whatever thing before she leaves. And it's just, he probably hasn't seen her since she's left, and the same is probably going to be true for his daughters now. He just keeps losing his whole family to this and not being able to see his loved ones again. I mean, that's got to be pretty stressful, pretty hard. And sometimes when you're put in a position that is unfavorable, it brings out the worst in you. And maybe that's just what's going on with him, with Laban, is that the circumstances are just bringing out the worst attributes of him, and he's not necessarily as bad as this looks. Genesis 31:51. And Laban said to Jacob, see this heap and this pillar, which I have set up between you and me. Genesis 31:52. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness, that I will not pass by this heap to you, and that you will not pass by this heap and this pillar to me for harm. So here we go. We got ourselves a boundary being made, a barrier, one to stop one from invading one another, so that they would both feel safe. Genesis 31:53. the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, and the God, the object of worship of their father, Terah, an idolater, judge between us. But Jacob swore only by the one true God, the dread and fear of his father Isaac. So they got all these things that they're going to swear to. But Joshua, knowing that there is only one true living God, only swears to him. Genesis 31:54. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and called his brethren to eat food. And they ate food and lingered all night on the mountain. Genesis 31:55. And early in the morning Laban rose up and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters, and pronounced a blessing, asking God's favor on them. Then Laban departed and returned to his home. Well, that is quite the chapter. And listening to this back, I was thinking that, when he was talking about, Laban pulling out flocks or pulling out sheep or whatever, that maybe there was more than one flock, and that, some of these wages, it was like he looked after whatever this flock was from so long. He was supposed to get a portion of it. But then Laban goes and divides the flocks and has his sons looking after him or something. Some other weird shady stuff like that, so that he didn't get a proper, paycheck of I have 300 sheep. So there's some stuff going on that way. And the way that this ends, this is kind of like how I really like a lot of these Bible chapters, where you have this there's just this conflict where it just starts escalating. And it's like, oh man, and how is this gonna play out? People are gonna die. This is getting crazy. This is getting wild. But then it ends up having a peaceful resolution at the end, and we kind of get an ending where it's like they make peace, and everyone gives kind of thanks to God and whatever, and it just really makes for a good experience. But I don't know. I really like those kind of stories or situations, and they kind of happen in real life as well, right? It's nothing crazy and unexpected for it to kind of go that direction. So it's good. I'm interested to see where this is going next. So until next time.